Starting now, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very delighted today to have a very special guest to educate us about a very important topic. You know, when I was searching about parenting at University of Missouri, I was surprised to see such a very useful tool recognized by the Parent Link, which is part of the School of Education at University of Missouri. And I will let our guest talk more about this as resources for families in general. And the need for this topic is really obvious. You know, we just 3 weeks ago, we have a different normal than now. We used to spend 8-10 hours a day in our work while our kids spend that time in the school, and we just see them 2 to 4 hours a day. And all the parenting advice is spend more time with the kids, spend quality time with your kids, be present, spend time with them. And then we have no time. And all of a sudden we are facing them 24/7. We have all this time, but that brought all the challenges on handling their moods, their emotions, the new duties, the new work from home, the new study at home. So there's a lot of challenges that face us as parents and as families. And it is the best time to seek the advice from the experts in the field. So join me please to welcome Christie Lewis, who is a family support specialist and has a master's degree in education. And also we're gonna have Abby Guinn, but I think she goes with a different last name. Let me just pull it from here.
Yes, Underwood is my
last name. Yeah. This is a post-marriage name. All right. So welcome both guys. You are both at the Parent Link service to the University of Missouri. I'll let you talk about that in more details, but with no further ado, Christy, go ahead and start your presentation, which is going to be shared by the community at the end. And we are recording this presentation, and also we are going live through Facebook page as well. So this is a pure family-friendly presentation. Please go ahead and grab your spouse and listen to these beautiful advices, because we need to be on the same page when handling parenting with our kids. Christy, all yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I am humbled to be here this evening. I looked at some of the prior guests that you've had, and boy, we're walking in some big shoes to fill. But hopefully we are going to give you some really good I don't want to say advice, but guidelines to go by that might help with managing what we have all become part of, which is this new normal that all of a sudden has been thrust upon us. And so we called it SuperParents because you're a little bit like superheroes now. You are not only managing at-home tasks, but you're also, some of you may be working from home at the same time, and we're full-time parents. And so there's a lot going on in most people's houses right now. And so my name, as you said, is Christie Lewis. I am a family support specialist, but I also work with a lot of the schools here in the mid-Missouri area. I help them implement something called school-wide PBS, which is positive behavior supports and interventions. And it's a discipline framework within our schools, not only public schools, but also some private schools as well. And so I'll let Abby introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, my name is Abby Underwood. I am also a family support specialist for Parent Link. And then I also have a job where I am an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, and I provide therapy to kids and parents for various emotional issues, including a lot of parenting stuff. So stuff that's all very relevant to what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. And so this would not be a good, effective meeting if we didn't have some meeting agreements to start off with. And we just add some pretty simple things. If you mute your microphone when you're not speaking, that will be perfect, because that helps really cut down on the background noise for everybody. We just ask you to, when we start taking questions, that if you speak, could you speak up loudly and clearly? And we will try to do the same to make sure that you can hear and understand us. And we always are going to encourage you to ask any clarifying questions. If something we say does not make sense, please don't hesitate to ask for some clarification, because we are more than willing to share with you.
Just FYI, I am the police officer here. Everyone is unmuted, and they cannot unmute themselves unless I allow them to. So you're good to go.
Awesome. All right. No background noise then. We're good.
Yeah, good.
All right. Miss Abby.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to talk through kind of the objectives of what we hope to leave you guys with today. So hopefully by the end of this session, everybody here will be able to set realistic expectations for themselves and their family during this pandemic time. We're going to explore the importance of emotional regulation, kind of as ourselves as parents, as well as helping our children do the same. Considering our children's behaviors as potential signs of trauma. Have a coping skills plan for our entire family. So kind of knowing how, again, to cope as your adult self, as well as how to help your children cope with what's going on. Determine a quarantine-friendly schedule, which I think is a huge overtaking right now. And then consider setting clear expectations at home. And becoming familiar with the purpose of ParentLink and how we might be able to be a resource for you guys past tonight. And Christy, I do not have the ability to click through.
Okay, well, let me see what I can do about that.
Yeah, that's all right. You'll be able to guide me. I'm confident in you. So we're going to start out talking about expectations because I think this is going to be a really big deal of how you feel like you did during this entire time home. Like we were just hearing, there is so many complex things going on in this time, so many new parts of our lives that we're trying to navigate and balance, that whether we succeed or fail is kind of going to come down to what we're expecting of ourselves and what we're expecting of our kids. And so I really like this quote by Bruce Lee of, you're not in this world, or I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. If you see somebody on Facebook that's doing all of these really fun activities with their kids on a super tight schedule, and that's not within your realm of doing it, I encourage you to say good for them and not live up to that yourself unless that's something you want to do. So I want you to kind of start considering what your expectations are right now. So kind of what are your expectations of yourself? What are your expectations of your kids? And then what are the other outside expectations that are kind of coming in on you? So what is your boss, your coworkers, your child's teachers, other family members? What are all of these people expecting from you and your family during this time? And then we're going to kind of question, are all of these expectations realistic? Are they doable within the climate that we're in and within all of the expectations that exist for all of us? Okay, so I kind of want to start talking about this COVID-19 situation as a kind of collective trauma experience, meaning that we're all going through what is technically classified as a traumatic event. And nobody's immune from it. We're going through it as parents. Our kids are going through it as their little selves. And it's kind of a lot, right? And there's so many different parts to this trauma. There's the part of, the actual health crisis that's occurring and kind of being worried for our safety and people we love safety and the country as a whole, the world as a whole, all of those things. And then there's the trauma of being pulled out of all of our normal lives and our normal social circles and kind of being put in a different world, right? We're all kind of not trapped in our houses. I'm trying not to say that, but we're trapped in our houses, right? We're all kind of just stuck trying to figure out what we're doing these days. And so as adults, as parents, we're going to be experiencing a lot of emotions, right? This uncertainty and fear and grief and feeling overwhelmed. I have a 3-year-old that I can hear in there right now kind of melting down over who knows what, but I have to be able to focus here, right? That's a whole new thing to be able to do both at the same time and to have to do both at the same time, right? So it's juggling constantly. And then our kids are going through the same stuff, right? Whether or not they're aware and actually worried about the virus itself, they know something's going on, right? They feel the stress off of us. They know they're out of school. They know kind of the world is in a little bit of chaos right now. And kids aren't as great at telling us with their words what's going on for them. They tell us with their behavior. So these are kind of I really like this graphic that I found on different ways that kids might show what's going on for them. So a lot of it looks like behavior problems, right? So saying something like, the stupid remote doesn't work, or I don't want this for dinner, make something better. These are things that as parents we could see as just kind of obnoxious or maybe kind of bratty behavior, but they could be telling a bigger story than that. They could be telling us about what's going on under the surface with our kids. And that's something we want to help them with, right? Instead of just telling them to suck it up and eat the lasagna. Although you might say that too. So the bad news is that we cannot protect our kids from trauma. Not today, not any day. We do our best as parents. We try our best to keep them safe and to put them in a world that is safe for them. But at the end of the day, pandemics happen, right? Car accidents happen. Lots of scary stuff can happen that we cannot protect our kids from. But the good news is that we can increase the protective factors for our families. And these factors are listed out here in that little house. And these are research-based things that increase our ability to bounce back and get through tough situations. So no matter what life throws at you, if you have these protective factors built in, you're going to be better off than you would be. You're going to bounce back a little bit faster and even kind of grow in a good, healthy way during really tough times like a pandemic. So those are concrete support in times of need. So this is having people and social systems, kind of like looks like you have here. I'm looking at all these names and I'm amazed at the community you guys have right here of people who are just here with you. And I think that's amazing. So who do you call when your job is furloughed or you're laid off and you don't know how you're going to get groceries that next week? Do you have concrete ways of dealing with things like that? That's kind of the first factor. Parent resilience, we're going to kind of hopefully increase that a little bit tonight, which is really your own ability as a parent to bounce back from adversity, to deal with your own feelings, to get through tough stuff. Knowledge of parenting and child development. That's something we're also going to kind of hopefully increase with you tonight through Christie's portion that she'll talk about here in a little bit. And it's also something that Parent-Link can be an ongoing resource for. If you're feeling kind of stuck on how to deal with a certain part of parenting, or is this thing my kid's doing normal? We're always a resource you can call and kind of brainstorm and problem solve that with. Our social and emotional competence of children. So this is how well they're really able to verbalize what we were talking about a minute ago. If they're just complaining that they're bored versus if they can say, I'm bored because I'm really missing my friend that I usually hang out with, right? When they have that capacity to tell us the bigger emotion behind that boredom, then we're able to have a better conversation about it, and we can kind of help them problem solve, and we can help meet that need that they're having, instead of just saying, go clean your room. That was always my mom's answer. If I ever said I was bored, she was like, well, your room's dirty, go clean it, which I think is fair. But also, yeah, if we know there's more going on, we want to help them with that. And then last but not least is social connections. And I think this one is particularly challenging right now because our normal social connections, they're still there, but they look different, right? We're doing things like this instead of sitting in a room together, where we might kind of get more natural social interaction. So we're going to have to get kind of creative with making sure we're utilizing that one. And during this time when we're kind of all in our own spaces. So now I want to go back to that list I asked you a minute ago about and kind of reevaluate this. So knowing what we just learned about, this is kind of collective trauma that we're all going through, learning about what your kids might be going through as a part of that. What changes? What of these expectations do you want to change? And what do you maybe want to let go of, right? I think especially when we're looking at those expectations of other people, we have the option to say yes or no to those expectations. I was kind of thinking of trying to come up with an example for this to make it more tangible. And I was thinking about my mom. My mom is a very kind person, and she's a preschool teacher, and I have a preschooler. So she, in a very well-meaning, helpful way, has been sending me lots of resources and ideas and activities and things I can do during this time. And I work 2 jobs, and I'm a full-time mom right now, and my husband's home working his full-time job right now, and I don't have time to prep any of those activities, right? Like, that is just not where I'm at. We have fun. We're doing fun stuff. We have lots of toys you can explore and do stuff with. We're going on walks, but I don't have time for those activities. So I feel that expectation from my mom because she's a preschool teacher and that's what she knows is important. And I'm choosing not to go into it. I'm choosing not to take on that expectation because I don't have room for it right now. I'm trying to juggle a lot and that's just not going to fit. That doesn't mean I, say anything unkind to her about it. I accept it and say, oh yeah, Mom, that looks super fun. But I also know that I'm not going to spend my time and resources working on those things right now. So think about yourself and what expectations you're currently holding that you don't want to be holding, or that you're going to choose not to hold as you kind of go further into this time at home. Okay, so this is my favorite topic to talk about in general. Like I said, I'm a therapist. I do a lot with emotions, but especially when it comes to parenting, I really firmly believe that managing our own emotions as parents is the hardest work of parenting. You can have every tool, every strategy, read all the books, and if you can't handle your emotion in that moment when your kid is getting on your ever-loving nerve, you're not going to be effective. It doesn't matter what you know and what skills you have if you can't deliver it the way you want to. And I think about my own parenting. I'm by no means a perfect parent. Please don't hear that. I make mistakes all the time. And when I think about my own biggest mistakes, I kind of put my top 5 in my head of my biggest parenting mistakes. All of them were at times when my emotions were really high. I was feeling embarrassed, or I was feeling really frustrated, or I was tired, or there was something else going on. I was stressed, right? And those are the moments where I don't deliver my best parenting. And guess what? This is a stressful time. We're all stressed. No matter what your situation is, the stress is higher right now. So I think, when we were asked to make this presentation, my first thought was dealing with ourselves, right? Because if we're not dealing with ourselves, then we're not going to deliver the parenting that we want to deliver. And I'm really excited to hear that you guys have some kind of other speakers on these kind of topics more of mindfulness and that kind of stuff, because I think it's so important during this time to really take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our kids. So I have this I always like to start talking about this with talking about our brain, the brain stuff behind emotions. So I love this idea from Dan Siegel out of The Whole Brain Child, which is a great parenting book if anybody's looking for a recommendation. And he really talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. So our downstairs brain is kind of back here, the bottom of our brain. It's the oldest part of our brain. It's very reactionary or reactive. It's our fight, flight, or freeze. When I'm talking to kids, I always call it our lizard part of our brain because we kind of act like a lizard with it, right? Like we come into danger and we're like, either we freeze or we run away or we like rear up and try and fight. So it's an important part of our brain. It keeps us safe, but it doesn't do a lot. It just kind of does the basic stuff to keep us alive. And then we have our upstairs brain, or our prefrontal cortex, or cerebral cortex, which has all of our executive functioning, all of our really smart stuff. The decision-making, the planning, control over our body and emotions, as opposed to kind of the reactive part that we can't control. Just all of our good stuff, all of our really smart human stuff is right here. And when we are flooded with emotion, whether it's anger or stress or overwhelmed or fear, we kind of lose contact here. And we're functioning fully out of this part of our brain, which means that we don't make good decisions. We don't have good control over our emotions or bodies. We don't have good empathy. So it's really hard to be a parent and be a good parent when we're functioning back here. So I always say that the first work of parenting is learning how to get back here when you flip your lid. So he does this thing where he says, this looks like a brain, which it kind of does. And when we get really emotional, we flip our lid and this is gone, right? So getting this back into working order is such an important part of parenting. It's kind of the first step. And I also like to remember that we're our kids' first and most important teachers, right? So, and that comes with teaching them how to deal with emotions. In fact, if you think about your own emotions and how you deal with them, it probably goes back to your parents, and that probably goes back to their parents. And we kind of get this, the way that we learn to deal with our emotions goes back a long ways to whoever taught it to begin with. And so when we're wanting our kids to respond well to things, when we're wanting them to respond well to stress or to being mad or to being sad, that we first have to do it first so that they see what it should look like. So we really want to think of ourselves as emotional models. And I think this is kind of a great time to practice because there's so much emotion going on, right? So if we can really start to see this as a time to practice that modeling, then maybe we even come out of this a little bit stronger as a parent and as a family. I'm also a big fan of telling your child what you're doing and why. I do this all the time with my daughter where we're like, in a tiff because she's 3 and has the attitude of a 13-year-old. And I'm getting frustrated and I'm getting ramped up and I'm like, you know what? mommy needs to take some deep breaths so I can calm down my body, right? And I literally say that out loud, and then I do it. And A, I'm coping with myself, right? I'm calming myself down. But B, I'm giving her a tool, right? She's seeing what I do when I get frustrated. I don't throw toys and try and kick my parents, right? Like some of us might try to do. But instead I regulate myself and I work on getting that upstairs brain back intact so that I can make better choices. So the ground rules that I always kind of come back to for both us as parents and for our kids as kids is that all emotions are okay. We have all of them. We can't make them go away. They're okay to be there, but all behaviors are not okay. And we kind of help our kids learn which ones are and which ones aren't okay with ways of dealing with it. But again, we have to do it first, right? So if we're telling our kids yelling is not okay while we're yelling at them, then what are they really learning? So yeah, at this point, everybody's usually like, okay, whatever, I get it, but like, I'm also human. Maybe my parents didn't teach me well how to deal with emotions, so how am I supposed to do this? And for this particular presentation, I've chosen to go with this Scoby Plan that was developed by John Hughes out of Kent State University. He's really put this Scoby Plan together specifically for COVID-19. So it's a lot of kind of the same skills that I would teach at any point in time, but his packaging is kind of really beautiful, I think, for the time that we're in. So it's based on a lot of different psychological principles: exposure, acceptance, commitment, stress management, active coping, and it forms this acronym called CARES, and we'll kind of go through the different letters here in a second. And I really liked it because it's appropriate for the whole family, right? So these skills are applicable for you as the parents, but they're also things that you can kind of bring down to your children's level and help them with their feelings during this time as well. So it's kind of a catch-all for everybody. So the C stands for commit. And this one is really about committing to living your life consistent with your values. So we all have a system of values kind of made up from everything we've been through, our family heritage, our communities, all of these things. And when we're living in accordance with those, we feel good. And when we're not living in accordance to those, we feel really chaotic and kind of out of sorts. And so at a time when everything's out of sorts, it's really helpful to zone into living to those values anyway. So think about kind of your family and yourself and what values are important to you. There's some kind of listed out here for you to look at. And then we're going to get creative in how we can apply those, right? So if, for example, if one of your held values is, you know, a good relationship with your extended family, right? Before all of this happens, for the last 10 years, we have had every Monday night dinner with my husband's grandparents. It's a very long-standing tradition we've had, and we haven't seen them in a month. And that's weird, first of all. And it's also kind of, we're missing it, right? Those are people that we really care about. But to keep them safe and to keep us safe, we're not seeing them right now. So we have to get creative in making sure we maintain those connections, right? So we've started a Monday night dinner where we Zoom them in at the kitchen table and we talk to them just like we're sitting with them, right? So it doesn't look the same, it doesn't feel the same, but we're still living according to that value, and that feels good. We still get to be who we are as a family, even though we're in this weird world right now and can't do it the way we want to and the way we're used to doing it. And so this also helps us resist being just reactive and living this really shallow and frantic life. I think from a lot of people I've talked to, you know, that first week that we were all home was this like really frantic time for everybody, right? Everybody's like, how do I do this? Do we have enough groceries? Like juggle, chaos, right? And now that we're like a few weeks into it, they're starting to have this like settled feeling. And not that we feel great about it, we still don't really like it. It's still not really comfortable, but we're used to it, right? We're adaptable as people. We're falling into these patterns and these routines, and it's okay again, right? So not ideal, but it's okay. So just notice that pattern, and then what can we do to take it a step further? How are we going to be intentional about these routines and patterns that we're falling into so that we're, again, going back to our values and we're committing to live this life that we want to live, even though we're not in the ideal situation to do that? Okay, so the A in CARE stands for accept, and this is really about accepting all those feelings that we're feeling, right? We talked about earlier about the collective trauma and all the feelings that we're all feeling to different degrees, and just notice that it's normal and it's appropriate and it's okay, right? Like, we're supposed to be scared of pandemics. That makes sense, right? And that's why we do the things that we do. That's why we're all home to the extent that we can be. That's why we're washing hands when we're out and about, right? We're doing these things because that fear is healthy and normal. And so we don't need to push it away. When we push away and we deny our feelings, they kind of just grow and they build up. And we're not really living kind of in our full selves, so to speak. Like, there's this, we're kind of living in this shallow moment because we don't want to get into the deep stuff. And same with our kids. You know, if our kids are experiencing these same emotions that we're feeling, we kind of need to let them and say, like, yeah, I'm sad we can't go see grandma and grandpa too. It's kind of a bummer, right? And kind of acknowledge that they're in that with us and their feelings are just as valid as ours. And once we accept it, then we're able to move into that problem solving mode where we can actually, like, do something about it if we want to. But first we have to accept it. And I also like this point about the genuine emotions are really like the weather. They come on quickly, even really strong. So the best we can do is let it happen, right? And not try to, I mean, you can't fight the weather, right? I think this lesson was learned really strongly for me when my daughter was, she was just hitting that like 2-year-old stage where they like tantrum about everything for no good reason all the time. And I noticed that, you know, my gut was I wanted to like help her through it, right? Like, I'm a social worker. I deal with feelings. Like, I'm good at this, right? So I'd get down on her level and I'm like, let's take deep breaths. Let's talk about it, whatever. And it would just escalate it and escalate it and escalate it. And she'd scream and cry more. And it was a mess. And then one day I was like, what am I doing? She's allowed to feel this way. I don't need to talk her out of her feelings. So I totally changed my approach. And then from that point forward, when she would have these giant meltdowns, I'd just sit down next to her, just quietly, and let it happen. And it was amazing how much faster she moved out of it. That fast, she's over giving me a hug. She's ready to get past it. She's ready to engage with me and get help with it. And at that point, we could do, okay, do you want to take a deep breath to help you feel better? That kind of stuff. But first, I just had to accept it. I had to stop trying to fix it for her and just let her experience it. As uncomfortable as it was for me to watch, right? Like, it's not fun to watch somebody have big feelings, but it's just that storm, right? The storm blows in, it makes a bunch of noise, it looks bad, and then it blows out. And if we can kind of notice that happening with our feelings and let that happen, it's a lot less painful. So the R in CARES is for relax. So this is just kind of a big bullet point, but about learning some kind of relaxation techniques. So there's a lot out there. I'm not going to tell you which one to do. It sounds like, again, you have other speakers coming in to talk about some of this stuff. Any of these terms on here are good to Google: progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, MBSR. Any of that stuff is going to be helpful. It's about finding what fits for you and what can help you relax. But this is, the R is re-engaging that top part of our brain, right? When we're in the bottom, what is it, the downstairs brain, I lost my wording there. When we're in our downstairs brain, relaxing helps bring us back. It helps bring us back into that upstairs brain. So finding something that does that for you. And it reduces our overall level of arousal, which kind of takes the anxiety just down a notch. And yeah, you're just gonna feel less of those worried and anxious feelings when you're relaxed. That makes sense, right? So I want to teach a couple. They're on the next slide, just kind of basic stuff. So breathing is the first thing I always teach people. And everybody's like, oh, but Abby, I know how to breathe. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know that it's so powerful? Do you know that it's this powerful skill that can get you back into your upstairs brain? Because that's when it becomes useful. I mean, I guess breathing's useful all the time, right? But it has this extra level of helpfulness when we're able to use it in this way. So this can be as simple as just taking big deep breaths. You want to make sure that you're filling up your belly. So I'll often have people kind of put their hand on their stomach and feel the air go in. So kind of up here breathing is not what we're after. It's using your diaphragm and going down into your stomach. Or I always like to teach the kid-friendly ways, because again, these skills are just as applicable for helping your kids cope through these things as yourself. So the first is pizza breathing, where you imagine your big yummy pepperoni, pineapple, black olive pizza. That's my favorite. And you smell it, smell the cheese, smell the yumminess, and then cool it off. So doing something like this is really helpful for kids because it gives them something to kind of focus on. Again, kids are very visual people. So kind of having that visualization is powerful for them. Especially for our younger kids, actual tangible things like blowing bubbles or blowing a pinwheel can be really helpful. My daughter has a pinwheel in her room that she knows is for helping her calm down. She doesn't know it's just because she's breathing, but she knows it helps, and that's what she uses it for if she's needing that. Dragon breathing, kids, especially kids who have kind of anger concerns, have a lot of fun with this one where they breathe in and then like a dragon breathing fire. They always have a fun time with that one. And again, it doesn't matter how they're breathing as long as they're taking some breaths. And then just like anything with any kind of relaxation skills, practice is such a must. It's amazing how many people I'll meet that are like, oh, I can't relax. That doesn't work for me. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't play basketball. You know, I've never really tried to learn how to play basketball. I've never practiced how to learn to play basketball, but I can't. I know that. So anything that's a skill in life, we have to practice for it to get better and for us to get good at it. So if you're a person that doesn't think you can relax, you probably just need some more practice. And then this is another technique that I'm not going to read through completely, but it's called a grounding technique, and it engages our 5 senses. So this can really help us bring our mind to the present moment, because senses are always based in the moment. And so they can kind of take us away from stressful thoughts. So you just do 5, you think about 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. And then by the end of that, you should feel a little bit better. So it's distracting enough that it gets us, again, away from our stressed out thoughts, but it's not too much for us to think when we're in our downstairs brain. So even when we're in that really heightened emotion, we can remember to do this. And so that's what kind of makes it powerful. So the E in CARES is about getting exercise. So exercise is kind of a really powerful medicine. It burns off stress hormones. Just moving our body feels good and can release good hormones, in fact. And then also going outside is kind of a thing he built into this. But I think, you know, one of the blessings that I see of this pandemic period is that we haven't lost the outside, right? I think that outside is such a powerful place to be and to make us feel like the space is bigger than our own homes. So getting out and going on walks or hikes, or even just sitting in your own backyard, feeling that sunshine, getting some vitamin D, can be a really powerful kind of treatment during this time. And again, for your kids as well. Never forget, this is all for kids too. Schedule. So setting a schedule is something that just about everybody is recommending during this time, again, for you as well as your kids, because time kind of starts to feel meaningless and it all kind of runs together. I don't know if I'm the only one here that has forgotten what day it is so far, but I'm like, what is today? Oh, it's Thursday. That's weird. Not today, it's Tuesday, but Thursday was the day I forgot what day it was. Because time kind of feels meaningless, right? Like every day is about the same, and weekends don't feel that different from weekdays, unless you're also trying to juggle work, and then it sort of does. But schedules make us feel more kind of normal, and they make us feel kind of more human. So set schedule times, and this doesn't have to be a rigid schedule where you have to, like, every 15 minutes is dictated for you. But, you know, kids do school in the morning, and then we have lunch, and then we have playtime, and then we have bed. You know, just kind of a loose schedule there helps everybody know what to expect. And especially kids, especially the younger they are, thrive on schedules so much because they know what to expect. I don't know if you've ever been to like a conference or something like this, and you know, they have the schedule there for the day, and like that's kind of the first thing we as adults look at, right? We're like, okay, when's the break? When's lunch? When are we done? Like, these are the things we want to know when we're starting out. And because that makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we know what to expect and we know what's coming. And then we can kind of adjust our brain to match that. So things like getting dressed. Don't stay in your pajamas all day. Although I'm really loving the kind of idea of like your daytime pajamas and your nighttime pajamas. I'm very pro that idea. But change, right? Make the change from day to night and from work time to playtime. Like help yourself make those transitions. Same with eating times. You know, it's easy to snack all day, and you know, there's obviously some health reasons why that might not be a good idea, but there's also mental health reasons. Having the schedule of having a meal to look forward to helps us kind of plan out our day. Try not to watch the news all day, especially, you know, not even just watching the news, but consuming the news on your phone or on Facebook or whatever, because it can get really overwhelming. If you're spending all day in that anxious space, then you're missing out on a lot, first of all, and you're spending a lot of time in that downstairs brain, right? Because the news is kind of scary right now. Yeah, and then just maintaining the schedule also leaves less time for worry, right? If you're kind of busy and you're having time for fun and for rest and for exercise, then you're busy and you're having less time to just sit and kind of be mopey, so to speak. And then this is also kind of an idea, an intervention for people who are experiencing a higher level of stress about the pandemic, stress and anxiety, which is to actually schedule your worry. So this is an intervention I've learned for any kind of anxiety, but I think it's especially applicable right now because this worry can take up a big part of our day, right? And again, it's not that we don't want to worry at all, because this worry is normal, but if it's consuming our whole day, that's really hard, and it takes over some really good stuff that we could be getting during our day. So set aside an hour that this is my worry time. Your spouse will probably think you're a little crazy. It's okay. Tell them I told you to do it, but kind of set a time where you can sit with those thoughts and you can feel those feelings and you can consume the news and you can play out all the what ifs in your head, but don't let it take away your whole day. And then when you're in the rest of your day and one of those thoughts pops up, just remind yourself, like, I got time for that later, right? I have this whole worry hour for you, little thought. I don't need you right now. So yeah, so read through that if that's something that applies to you, because I think it's a really helpful intervention for a lot of people right now. Okay, so I think Christy, this is where you take over and start talking about how to actually handle those behaviors that our kids are showing us.
Okay, so I'm going to try to build off a lot of what Abby said. She gave some really good points about how kids can react or respond to stress. And we all know that in this situation, there are a lot of unknowns. And so we're all experiencing a myriad of feelings. And sometimes we forget that even though we have little people in the house, those little people still have those big emotions as well. And so it just becomes a matter of kind of setting that safe space in our house and helping them to learn how to manage that. So what I do is I work with schools and I help staff set up a framework within their schools. And what we do is we bring them evidence-based interventions because what we know is that when students are struggling behaviorally, there's typically something underlying it. And generally that's affecting their academics. And so what we do is we come in, we talk with schools. So it really applies a lot to what parents can do at home as well. And it's all about what Abby mentioned earlier, which is really being clear and setting expectations. So a lot of what you can do right now at home is really helping your kids understand what you expect them to be doing and how you expect them to act. What we know from research, and even as being parents right now, I've raised 4 kids of my own. My youngest is 21, my oldest are 27. So we know that kids do well when they have a routine and a structure. It helps them to feel like things are more in control. And so right now, when things are kind of crazy all around us, that still carries over when we're at home, when we might be tempted to be a little more lax. We can roll, we can go with the flow, we can do some fun things, but still maintaining some sense of structure at home is going to help as well. And so one of the things that having these expectations and having the structure at home can help with is building that social emotional learning. And that's those relationships, our kids learning how to manage their emotions. And as Abby said, it really does start with us because we model a lot of that behavior. So a lot of what we're doing at home and how we're reacting or responding to things is super important, that we're setting a good example. Do I expect you to do it all the time? Absolutely not, because we are human. And I tell that to my school staffs as well. We're human. We're going to have moments where we mess up, but we have that conversation and we say, hey, mommy should have handled this better. Or, you know, we can have that conversation with our kids and help them understand that we are human and we do make mistakes. What I really want to hit on, and I hit on this a lot with schools when I'm talking with them as well, parents, the same thing. Behavior, as Abby said, is communication. It's communication for kids. And so a lot of the things that you're seeing happening at home are just their way of communicating, because a lot of kids don't have the skills or the words to express the emotions that are happening with them. And so right now, what I always tell people is don't take it personal. It's not about you. They're not trying to do something to you or it's about you. It is simply their way of trying to get their needs met. And so if you can keep that perspective and take that it's not personal towards you, it's their way of getting those emotions out, that helps you to maintain that. I always say in schools it's procedural when you handle things, but when you take it as not personal, it really helps you to keep your distance and keep your cool, not flip your lid, as Abby said earlier. One of the things we'll talk about is really being proactive with that environment at home. And so when we're in a classroom, I always tell teachers to look around and think about behaviors that they're seeing in their classroom and what's going on in the environment around us. Same thing at home. We're looking for things. We're kind of like scientists when we're in our own home. We're looking for triggers or things that can set our kids off. And so those are some things that we can adapt and adjust, because I can't make Bobby or Susie behave. There are some things that you could do that might scare them into that, or, you know, some sense of that, but they're in control of their own bodies. So what I want to do is really make that, set those expectations and really encourage them to give me the appropriate behaviors that I want to see. So when we talk about that, thinking about that behavior, what I want you to realize is that whatever behaviors are happening within our home, whatever setting we're in, it's related to something in that environment. So maybe it's the interactions with siblings, maybe it's stress that they're going through, maybe it's they are wanting something, they don't know how to express that effectively, maybe they're hungry, they're tired. There's always something underlying it, and if we can do a little bit of scientific analysis and really look at the situation, we can generally figure out if we have an ongoing behavior that keeps happening. We can look at what's happening right before it and right after and try to figure out how we can adjust that environment to make that behavior not as effective for our kids. It works in a classroom. It's the same thing that we can do at home with our own children. What I always talk about, and Abby mentioned this several times, is that we get those expectations. We have a clear picture in our mind. One of the things that we sometimes fail to do is really tell our kids what our expectation is in the way that makes it real for them. I'm not a verbal person. If you tell me something verbally, it's probably going to go in one ear and out the other. I would love to retain it, but I don't always do that. That's not how I learn the best. And so when we think about that, what we have to do is put some steps in place. If I've decided in my home that we are going to be kind, I have to paint the picture for my kids what that be kind looks like. What are the behaviors that define what being kind is? Then I'm going to teach it with them. Importantly, I'm going to also model it for them. I'm going to show them exactly what it looks like. Then I'm going to have them show me what some examples might look like of them being kind and helping out in the family. And if they don't get it the first time and I still see problems happening at home and we're not maybe using kind words or helping our brother or sister with their things that they aren't able to do on their own, then I'm going to go back and reteach. So that fourth step is super important. If we continue to see those behaviors after we've taught them, we've modeled them as parents and shown them what it looks like, we've allowed them to practice, then we're going to go back and reteach. And that's the same thing I talk about when I'm working with the school teacher.